May 633 AD. The plains of Mesopotamia are burning. In the span of a few short weeks, the unthinkable has happened. 2 imperial armies of the Sassanid Empire have been annihilated. The Battle of Chains left their frontier guards shackled in the sand. The Battle of River turned the Euphrates red with the blood of their heavy infantry. For the Emperor Yezdigerd III in Ctesiphon, this was no longer a border raid. It was an existential crisis. The barefoot lizard-eaters of the desert, as the Persian court arrogantly called them, had kicked down the door to the empire's breadbasket. The humiliation was unbearable. The strategic situation was critical. If Khalid ibn al-Walid was not stopped now, the road to the capital would be wide open. But empires do not fall easily. The Sassanid superpower, though exhausted by years of war with Rome, still possessed vast resources. The emperor ordered a full mobilization. He would not send just another army, he would send 2. He would overwhelm the desert commander with sheer numbers and sophisticated strategy. He would crush Khalid between the hammer and the anvil. As the Arab poet later wrote, "The lion does not sleep when the jackal enters his den. He wakes and he kills." This is the story of the Sassanid Empire's greatest attempt to destroy the sword of Allah. And it is the story of how Khalid ibn al-Walid responded with a tactical masterpiece, a maneuver so complex and so deadly that military historians compare it to Hannibal's triumph at Cannae. Welcome to the Battle of Walaja. The Persian strategy was sound. It relied on their greatest advantage, manpower. The emperor dispatched a massive new army under the command of Andarzaghar. Andarzaghar was not a court politician like Hormuz. He was a veteran governor of the frontier, a man who grew up fighting border skirmishes. He knew the Arabs. He respected their speed, and he intended to neutralize it. His orders were to march to Walaja, a location where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers narrow, creating a natural choke point. But Andarzaghar was only the bait. A second army, led by the legendary General Bahman, was marching south from Ctesiphon to join him. Bahman commanded the heavy imperial reserves, the iron core of the Sassanid military. The plan was simple. Andarzaghar would dig in at Walaja and lure Khalid into a stalemate. Once Khalid was pinned down, Bahman's army would arrive from the north, flanking the Muslims and crushing them against the river. It was a classic divide and conquer strategy. Khalid's intelligence network, the Eyes of the Desert, picked up the movement of these 2 leviathans. Khalid realized immediately that he was walking into a trap. If the 2 Persian armies united, their combined mass would be unstoppable. He had to move. Khalid gathered his commanders. The accounts tell us he looked at them and said, "We must strike the first enemy before the second can tie his sandals." Khalid ignored the second army. He pushed his men to the breaking point, racing across the scorching terrain to intercept Andarzaghar at Walaja before reinforcements could arrive. The Muslims arrived to find Andarzaghar waiting for them. The Persian general had chosen his ground well. He had deployed his massive force, estimated at 30,000 to 50,000 men, in a wide plain, with a ridge of hills behind them to protect their rear. Andarzaghar was confident. He had the numbers, he had the terrain, and he knew help was on the way. He looked at the smaller, dust-covered Muslim force and reportedly said to his officers, "Let them come. They are like flies flying into a web. The more they struggle, the tighter we shall bind them." The battlefield of Walaja was a flat plain, bordered by ridges. It was perfect for the heavy Persian infantry to form their shield wall and grind the lighter Arab force to dust. But Khalid saw something Andarzaghar did not. To the Persian general, the ridges behind the battlefield were a safety measure, a wall to protect his back. To Khalid, they were a weapon. The night before the battle, under the cover of a moonless sky, Khalid pulled off one of the most audacious gambits in military history. He took his two best cavalry commanders, Suwaid and Rafe, and gave them 4,000 horsemen, nearly half his cavalry strength. His orders were specific and terrifying. They were to ride wide, far around the Persian flanks, using the darkness and the gullies of the terrain to stay invisible. They were to position themselves behind the ridges at the rear of the Persian army. And then they were to wait. Khalid told them, "Do not show yourselves. Not when the battle starts, not when the swords clash. Wait until the enemy believes he has won. Wait for my signal." By dawn, the 4,000 horsemen had vanished into the landscape. To the Persians looking across the field, Khalid's army appeared dangerously small. His center looked thin, his flanks looked weak. It was exactly what Khalid wanted them to see. The sun rose over Walaja. The drums of the Sassanid army began to beat, a slow, rhythmic thunder that shook the ground. Andarzaghar ordered the advance. Thousands of Persian heavy infantrymen, clad in chainmail and carrying tall rectangular shields, began the march. The Battle of Walaja had begun. The collision was deafening. The lighter Muslim infantry, armed with spears and swords, met the heavy Persian wall. For hours, the battle was a stalemate of brutality. The Persians fought with the discipline of a superpower. They pushed forward, step by bloody step, their sheer weight driving the Muslims back. Khalid, commanding from the center, watched the lines carefully. He could see the exhaustion setting in on his own men. He could see the Persian confidence growing. It was time for the second phase of his plan. Khalid issued a counterintuitive order. The center must retreat. This was not a rout, it was a controlled withdrawal. The Muslim center began to give ground, stepping back, fighting, and stepping back again. To Andarzaghar, watching from his command post, this looked like the beginning of the end. The Arabs were breaking. Their line was bending backward into a crescent shape. The scent of victory is a powerful intoxicant. Andarzaghar abandoned caution. He ordered his wings to swing inward, pouring everything he had into the center to shatter the Muslim line once and for all. The Persian army compressed. They crowded together, shoulder to shoulder, pushing into the concave pocket Khalid had created. They were so focused on the men in front of them, they forgot to look at the hills behind them. The trap was set. The enemy was fully committed. The Persian army was now shaped like a dense ball, pushing deep into the Muslim formation. Khalid raised his sword. The signal was given. From behind the ridge, a sound emerged that froze the blood of the Persian rear guard. Not the sound of wind, but the thunder of 16,000 hooves. Suwaid and Rafe, the hidden commanders, crested the hills. They did not pause. They charged down the slope like an avalanche of steel. Allahu Akbar! The cry rang out from the rear. The Persian soldiers in the back ranks turned around, eyes widening in horror. They expected safety. They found heavy cavalry charging at full gallop. The impact was catastrophic. The Muslim cavalry smashed into the exposed rear of the Sassanid army. At the exact same moment, Khalid halted his retreating center. The broken Muslim infantry suddenly planted their feet, locked their shields, and pushed back with renewed fury. The trap snapped shut. The double envelopment was complete. The Persian army was surrounded on all sides. In front, the Muslim infantry. Behind, the Muslim cavalry. On the flanks, Khalid's light horsemen closed the circle. It was a tactical miracle. A smaller force had completely encircled a larger one. Chaos erupted inside the Persian ranks. The men in the center couldn't swing their swords because they were pressed so tightly against their comrades. The men in the rear were being cut down by lances they couldn't see coming. Panic is contagious. It spreads faster than fire. Andarzaghar tried to rally his men, shouting, "Stand fast! Break through!" But his voice was lost in the screams of the dying. The disciplined imperial army dissolved into a terrified mob. It became a slaughter. The Battle of Walaja effectively ended, and the massacre of Walaja began. Historical sources tell us the killing lasted until sunset. The precision of the encirclement meant that very few Persians escaped. Andarzaghar, the man who had boasted of binding the Arabs like flies, managed to break out with a small bodyguard. But his fate was perhaps crueler than his soldiers. He fled into the deep desert, hoping to reach Ctesiphon. He lost his way. The desert, which he had failed to respect, claimed him. He died of thirst, alone in the sands, while his army lay dead at Walaja. The victory was absolute. Khalid ibn al-Walid had destroyed the third Persian army in a row. He had executed a maneuver that military academies would study for 1,000 years. As the dust settled, Khalid stood over the battlefield. The loot was immense: gold, silver, fine armor, and supplies meant to feed the empire. He gathered his exhausted, blood-stained warriors. They were simple tribesmen, far from home, staring at wealth beyond their wildest dreams. But Khalid knew the war was not over. The second army, the one led by Bahman, was still out there. The emperor's rage had not been extinguished. It had been fueled, and just a few days' march away, at a place called Ulais, the Persians were gathering every last man, woman, and auxiliary they could find. They were no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. The river of blood had been a tragedy. Walaja had been a tactical masterpiece. But Ulais would be a bloodbath that would haunt Khalid's legacy forever. Subscribe to Historic War Lens for the next battle.